So, some of you already heard a little bit of this, but I'll cover it again briefly for you. My wife was adopted. I met, fortunately for me, I met the parents that raised my wife, the couple that raised my wife before they both passed. Tragically, both her mother and her father passed within a year or so of each other, and right after I met them. So I met my wife. We traveled to her hometown, very far away in Oregon. I met her parents, wonderful people. Her mother was a real pleasure. Her father also a real pleasure. I have fond memories of buying her father a bottle of Jack Daniels and sitting and having drinks with him until we were both plastered and having him tell me his life story. Fascinating situation, fascinating couple, really, really good, solid people. Shortly after my wife and I met, unfortunately, her mother had a heart attack. It was tragic for her. It was tragic for both of us. We traveled back there. And then sometime later, her father kind of continued to go downward spiral, as often happens with people who are married for a long time. And then he passed a year or so later. That's a sad story, but I'm fortunate to have met her parents. To this day, it saddens me that my wife, I keep calling her my mother. There must be some weird Freudian shit there. I'm big into psychology, by the way, so I studied Freud and Jung and all these people, so that's why I did the Freudian thing. So my wife, I'm a little saddened that my wife never got to meet my father. My father was, for me, an amazing man. Everybody who met my father seemed to like my father for the most part. Some of his coworkers, not so much, because my dad had a bit of an ego, but at times. But my father was an amazing man, and it saddens me that my wife never got to meet my father, who I think she would have gotten a real kick out of. My mother, unfortunately, not so much. I didn't have such a great relationship with my mother. My mother, frankly, in a lot of ways, wasn't a great person. Yeah, maybe we'll get into that in our future times. But my wife then, after her parents passed, I think something happened essentially, and a law passed in which people who were adopted like herself were finally allowed to obtain their birth parents' medical records, so that they have a right to know what kind of things they might have conditions for, cancer diagnoses or whatever. And so my wife went out and did some searches with newly released information and discovered who her mother was. It was an amazing story, by the way, when we weren't quite sure who her mother was, and we were looking in a yearbook of the woman that we thought was going to be her mother, and turned to the page with her yearbook, and I saw my wife in her mother's face, and I was just like, oh my God, there is no question that that's your mother. And it was a very tearful moment, because it was a dead ringer. Like it was just a powerful moment for both of us. She found her mother, and unfortunately she found that her mother had already passed, I believe, due to cancer complications. And so she never got to meet her mother, even though she found out who she was. And then some time had passed, and the trail got cold, and she ended up just recently, in this last few months, just recently finding out her biological father. So she tracked down her biological father, then found out that her father has other children. And so by extension now, my wife now has some half-sisters, I guess you would call it. I'm horrible on the genealogy kind of stuff like that. I guess they're half-sisters because they have different mothers, but the same father, right, as my wife. So my mother, I did it again, fuck Freud. Anyways, so my wife, I did not marry my mother. I did not marry my mother. I do not have the Oedipus complex. Let's just get that straight right now. There are very, very few similarities between my wife and my mother on this Freudian bullshit that we're down right now. Anyways, the point being is that where the hell am I going with that? I got so lost on Oedipus and Freud that I've lost my train of thought. The point being is that she met her sisters. We have established a relationship, and it turns out her sisters live in the Vegas area, Nevada, Utah, very close to Vegas. One of them travels to Vegas on a regular basis. And so we all had this idea as it's approaching our birthdays. By the way, my birthday is March 12th. My wife's is March 20th. We have other people who are going who have birthdays in March. So we're doing this whole shit shindig, a last hurrah, if you will, with some of the money that we had set aside from selling our house in Everett and moving here, to go down and have a family reunion of sorts and meet. I'm parked, by the way, so that's why I'm back looking at the camera. To meet my wife's sisters. And so I'm going to meet my sisters by extension, her sisters by extension. They've all agreed to allow me to photograph and video record that reunion. And so I will try to do my best to share that with you as we meet them for the first time. We've been getting to know them online. Now we get to go visit them. And we're going to stay in an Airbnb in Vegas just off the Strip. We've got 4 shows planned to watch. We're going to see lots of shows, including The Sphere. We're going to see Mystere. We're going to see Rouge, which is a burlesque show. We're going to see The Awakening. We're going to do all kinds of traveling around, and I'm going to cover some true crime stuff down there, maybe Mandalay Bay, maybe the Trump Plaza where the Cybertruck blew up. We're going to talk about a lot of things. I'm going to continue to do these video series, but for now, thanks for listening. If you're still with me, that means you give a shit about human beings. So thank you for that.